He was the face of justice on television, the man in the mask who never missed, never killed, and always stood for what was right. But behind the silver bullets and the white hat, Clayton Moore's life was nothing like the clean-cut hero he played. One moment, he was America's most trusted cowboy. The next, he was ripped from the show without warning. And decades later, in a stunning twist, a courtroom tried to take away the very mask that defined him. This wasn't just the story of the Lone Ranger. This was a man who lived through love, betrayal, heartbreak, and humiliation, and somehow still held on to his legend until the very end. Long before the world knew him as Clayton Moore, he was just Jack Carlton Moore, a restless boy in Chicago with a taste for danger. While other kids played baseball, Jack was climbing trees, flipping through the air, and testing how far he could push his body. By 8 years old, he wasn't just a playful kid, he was a circus acrobat. He spent his summers in Canada, not relaxing, but perfecting high-risk stunts, hanging upside down from branches, and training like a gymnast. By 19, Jack was no ordinary teenager. He was a professional trapeze artist with a group known as the Flying Bears. And he wasn't just swinging through the air. He was the catcher, the one who had to grab others mid-flight or let them fall. Every night was life or death. Then came the 1934 Chicago World's Fair. Millions came to marvel at the future, and there, high above the crowds, was Jack Moore, dazzling them with strength, grace, and daring precision. Scouts in the audience weren't just impressed with his flips. They saw something else. The jawline, the presence, the charisma. Jack wasn't just a performer anymore, he was a face meant for cameras. That chance moment turned him toward modeling in New York, where he became the picture-perfect all-American man. His face was on ads, catalogs, magazines, the country's idea of the ideal, but while modeling paid the bills, it left him hollow. Pictures were silent. Jack wanted to move, to act, to live on screen. So in 1938, with nothing but ambition, he packed up and left for Hollywood. No contracts, no guarantees, just a portfolio and his body trained to do the impossible. At first, he was just another nameless stuntman in the background. But Jack Moore was watching, learning, waiting, and soon Hollywood would learn his name. Hollywood in the late 1930s was ruthless. For every star who lit up the screen, 100 hopefuls were left in the shadows. Jack Moore, now grinding through stunt work and nameless cameos, refused to stay invisible. And then, fate gave him a new identity. In 1940, producer Edward Small took one look at him and said what everyone else was thinking. Jack Moore sounded too ordinary. The name had to carry weight, strength, and star power, so Jack was reborn as Clayton Moore. It wasn't just a name change, it was a transformation. Clayton Moore now believed he was meant for the screen. That same year, he married Mary Frances in a whirlwind Las Vegas ceremony. It had all the drama of a Hollywood elopement, fast, flashy, and full of promise. But just as quickly as it began, it fell apart. Within 2 years, they divorced. Moore buried himself in work, and that's when opportunity struck. In 1942, Republic Pictures cast him in Perils of Neoka, a wildly adventurous serial where he played Dr. Larry Grayson, a man who rode horses, fought enemies, scaled cliffs, and even performed brain surgery in caves. It was over the top, but Moore made it believable. He wasn't faking the stunts, he was doing them, and audiences could see the difference. Republic knew they had something. They started pushing Moore as their next big action star, someone who could rival even Buster Crabbe. He had the looks, the intensity, and most importantly, the authenticity. On screen, he wasn't pretending to be a hero. He was one. But just as his career began to surge, Moore hit pause. In 1942, with World War II raging, he enlisted in the Army Air Forces. A knee injury kept him from flying combat missions, but instead of stepping back, Moore used his Hollywood skills to serve in another way. He produced training films, boosted morale, and created shows for the troops. And during this time, something even more personal happened. He proposed to model Sally Allen, not in a glamorous Hollywood ballroom, but in a simple phone call from the base. She said yes instantly, and soon she was living with him in the Arizona desert. Their wartime romance didn't fade after the war ended. It grew into a marriage that lasted more than 4 decades. By the time he was honorably discharged in 1945, Clayton Moore wasn't just another stuntman. He was a man with star power, a hero in the making, and Hollywood was waiting. In 1949, radio producer George W. Trendle was hunting for the man who could bring his masked hero to life on television. He wanted someone who didn't just play a cowboy, but someone who embodied justice itself. When Clayton Moore walked into the audition, he didn't hesitate. He looked Trendle in the eye and declared, "I am the Lone Ranger." That confidence sealed it. Moore had the athletic background, the commanding presence, and the heart of a performer who believed in the role. From the moment the first episode aired, he wasn't acting. He was the Lone Ranger. But it wasn't smooth behind the scenes. Trendle hated Moore's natural deep voice and demanded he mimic the radio actor Brace Beamer. Instead of fighting, Moore trained until he matched it perfectly. That discipline turned his voice into one of the most recognizable in television history. And when paired with Jay Silverheels as Tonto, the show became a cultural phenomenon. For kids across America, Saturday nights meant one thing: the masked rider and his loyal partner galloping into action. The Lone Ranger wasn't just TV, it was a movement. And at the center of it all was Clayton Moore. Then, in 1952, everything collapsed. Without warning, Clayton Moore was gone from the Lone Ranger. Fans were stunned. Kids tuned in, expecting their hero, and instead saw a stranger behind the mask. The replacement, John Hart, tried to carry the role, but something was missing. His voice was flat, his movements stiff. Audiences rejected him instantly. Ratings dipped, and letters poured in demanding Moore's return. Why was he replaced? To this day, no one knows for sure. Some whispered about contract disputes. Others claimed Moore wanted a share of the massive profits from Lone Ranger merchandise. Even his own daughter admitted he was never the type to demand money. What is certain is that George Trendle believed the mask mattered more than the man. He thought anyone could be the Lone Ranger, but he was wrong. Moore's absence proved it. A year later, the producers had no choice. Clayton Moore came back, and the show came back to life with him. With his return, Clayton Moore didn't just save the Lone Ranger. He cemented himself as the only man who could truly wear the mask. Over the years, he filmed 169 episodes, starred in 2 feature films, and became a household name. But Moore wasn't just playing a cowboy on screen. He lived it. He trained his horse, Silver, himself. He performed his own stunts, galloping, leaping, and wrestling villains without doubles. Even in his 70s, he could still spin his Colt 45s with lightning speed, thrilling fans who had grown up watching him. And above all, he lived by the code of the Lone Ranger. He reminded audiences again and again, the Ranger never killed, he only disarmed. To children across America, Moore wasn't just an actor. He was a moral compass, a real-life hero in a mask. But just when it seemed like nothing could tarnish his legend, Moore faced a battle darker than anything he fought on screen. By the late 1970s, Clayton Moore had spent decades carrying the Lone Ranger's legacy everywhere he went. He wore the mask at public appearances, recited the creed, and reminded fans of what honor looked like. But in 1979, everything changed. A lawsuit hit like a thunderbolt. The company that owned the Lone Ranger rights demanded Moore stop wearing the mask forever. They were preparing a new movie, and claimed his public appearances would confuse audiences. To Moore, it was more than a lawsuit. It was an attempt to erase his very identity. When the court ordered him to remove the mask, Moore didn't just feel defeated, he felt humiliated. The mask wasn't a prop, it was ISEM. But instead of disappearing, he got creative. Moore struck a deal with Foster Grant sunglasses. If he couldn't wear the black mask, he would wear shades, a clever workaround that kept his image alive. Children who saw him during those years didn't think of him as gone. To them, he was still the Lone Ranger, just wearing sunglasses. And while Moore fought for his mask, Hollywood released their big-budget Legend of the Lone Ranger movie. It bombed spectacularly. The new actor was ridiculed, the film lost millions, and critics tore it apart. Without Moore, the legend crumbled. The company had tried to silence him. Instead, they exposed a truth no one could deny. There was only one Lone Ranger. For 5 long years, Clayton Moore fought a battle that cut deeper than any Hollywood role. He wasn't just defending a costume, he was fighting for his identity. Fans rallied to his side, flooding him with over 1 million letters and petitions. At events, crowds gave him standing ovations so loud he couldn't even speak. Then, in 1984, the fight ended. Jack Rather, the businessman who had pushed the lawsuit, suddenly dropped the case. Just weeks later, he passed away. Some whispered that, facing death, Rather had a change of heart. Whatever the reason, Moore finally got his mask back. When he reappeared in full costume, white hat, black mask, silver bullets gleaming, the applause was thunderous. It wasn't just a comeback, it was vindication. He had proven that the Lone Ranger wasn't a studio's property, it was a part of him. From that moment on, Moore was more than an actor who once played a hero. He was the Lone Ranger, forever etched into American culture. Clayton Moore's final years were quieter, but no less meaningful. After the loss of his beloved wife Sally, he found companionship again with Clarita Petroni. Away from the spotlight, he lived simply, but the shadow of the Lone Ranger never left him. Even in his 80s, Moore was careful about how the world saw him. He avoided being photographed without his mask or hat, determined that fans remember the hero, not the frailty of old age. But in his last days, he showed a different kind of strength. Lying in a hospital bed, weak and fading, he reached for Clarita's hand and refused to let go. Even at the edge of life, he was still trying to comfort someone else. On December 28, 1999, Clayton Moore passed away at the age of 85, just after Christmas, just before a new millennium. It felt symbolic, the end of an era. He left behind his daughter, his wife, and millions of fans who never forgot the man behind the mask. Today, his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame still draws crowds. His black mask rests in the Smithsonian, and his legacy lives on in reruns, in memories, and in the timeless code he carried with him that justice, honor, and compassion always ride together. Clayton Moore wasn't just an actor who played a legend. He became the legend. And long after the curtain closed, the Lone Ranger still rides. Clayton Moore's life was proof that sometimes the line between a role and reality disappears. He wasn't perfect. He faced heartbreak, lawsuits, and moments that could have broken him. But through it all, he held on to something rare in Hollywood: integrity. When the mask was stripped away, he fought for it. When his career stumbled, he rose again. And when his body grew frail, his spirit never did. That's why fans didn't just see an actor in a costume. They saw a man who believed in the very code he recited on screen. In the end, Clayton Moore wasn't just remembered as the Lone Ranger. He became a symbol of what it means to stand for something bigger than yourself. A hero, not because he wore a mask, but because he lived the values behind it. And that's why, even today, when people ask, who was that masked man, the answer will always be the same: Clayton Moore.